Go. Good morning. This is the New York City Board of Standards and Appeals Public Review Session for May 2nd, 2016. We'll begin with a special order calendar decision items. Item number 1, 47-10BZ, 895 Zarega Avenue, the Bronx.
Okay, with this one, the fire department asked that we defer decision on this for 30 days, pending their review of the plans and indoor and outdoor storage areas, which we'd asked them to do.
Continued hearing items. Item number 2, 20262BZ, 950 Allerton Avenue, the Bronx.
Okay, they submitted sort of a landscaping plan, but it should have stated the number and type of each tree to remain and also those to be installed, because it will function as a guide for future maintenance and replacement. And then with respect to the elevation, which they added to it, if that's representing the full growth of the trees, then they're spaced too far apart. I looked up this particular tree online, and the recommended spacing is actually 5 feet on center. And in this case, the idea is to create a dense buffer. It's not like decorative planting. In fact, these types of cypress grow to be very, very tall, so in order to keep them dense, you have to keep trimming them at like to 8 feet, so that needs to be part of the maintenance plan. I noted the truck circulation route shows the truck drives on the sidewalk for a while in order to get to the pump. I'm wondering maybe there's a better place for the curb cut, or if the curb cut needs to be, wider or something. I don't understand that, because the truck is really on the sidewalk for a while. And then they had submitted the landscaping plan to get sort of approval from us to move forward with landscaping, but they also need to remember they have to respond to the other issues that we raised at prior hearings, including removal of the wooden storage sheds, use of the area behind the store. We wanted to know how that's going to be used and controlled, replacement of the collapsing fence wall and gate, repainting, removal of the vans at the rear, striping, and then finally photos to show that all that work was done. Anybody else?
They also, on their landscaping plan, they need to include the northwest corner of the site. There's a landscaping in that corner that is kind of needs some sprucing up and probably should have a plan for its future maintenance.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And I believe there were some brick walls that were leaning.
Right.
Maybe that's what you meant.
Yeah, that's what I mean. It was replacement or repair of the brick
the walls,
Yeah.
yes.
Anybody else? Okay.
Item number 3, 112281BZ, 10514 Astoria Boulevard, Queens.
They wanted to adjourn this.
Item number 4, 82686BZ through 82886BZ, 269 to 70-10 Grand Central Parkway, Queens.
Okay. We have a letter from a neighbor who's very concerned about the installation of the installations in general, and we also now have a 13-page petition opposing these installations by residents of the buildings, of all of the buildings. So I think we need to be very careful with this and keep it under short leash. The applicant did provide us with videos showing apparently that when the doors to the roof of building 1 are opened, the transmission power for the radio power drops from 2200 watts to under 800 watts. They also state, and they show us a photograph of a power off switch for emergencies. I'd like the fire department to take a look at this because it was really intended for them. I note that when they power off, I don't know what that means by power off. I don't know if that shuts down the whole thing, because some of the concern is there's that bulkhead which is too dangerous to go on even when that door is open and it powers down. So no one can be on that bulkhead for more than, it's something like 6 minutes. And if it doesn't power down in those hot zones, a person maximum is 30 minutes. So this needs to be verified, so if the fire department could take a look. The applicant's letter also states that they are unable to devise a system of continuous monitoring, which we asked them to do at the last hearing. I personally, given technology, I find it very difficult to believe or understand why such a system doesn't already exist or can't be created. But if it can't, then I would have to say that, from my perspective, we need to have a periodic monitoring system of designated points, which would, where the reports would go to, say, a tenant association, something like that, not management. Well, management would get it also, but a tenant association, because they're the ones who are more likely to bring it back here if the shutdown system or the powering has increased. Also, the plans need to be revised to remove the note that says substantial compliance with board's prior grant, because the reason we've been here since August is because precisely that this was not in compliance with the board's prior grant. Also, in terms of those drawings, there's an enclosure still shown around this one hotspot, which is obviously irrelevant because now the hotspot is rather enormous. And I think Commissioner Montanez had suggested, and I think it's a good idea, that the roof be painted so that you know where the hotspot zone is, especially for workers and fire department and everybody going up there, that they know that this is an area where potentially there's risk and that there should be some way of checking, like you can go down into that floor, the control floor, and check whether it's powered down. So there should also be, the plans need to show the location of the doors on which the automatic shutdown alarms are, as well as the location of the fire department emergency override, because I actually have no idea where that is. It should also show where the control room is, where you can see the antenna power controls. And there should be a description of how the override systems operate and who has control of them. This should all be on the plans. And then the periodic monitoring system must also be stated on the plans, like how that's going to be done, showing the monitoring points where the monitors will be placed. And the hotspot areas should be shown on that plan as well. So there's a lot of things that need to be done with the plans. There's an affidavit from Mr. Davies of Communications Leasing. I find it kind of confusing because we established that the maximum power levels are the maximums, and they can't be altered, and they can't be exceeded. So the offending equipment cannot be relocated without BSA approval. It's not they were saying somehow they'll control the relocating of the equipment. No, that's what we're supposed to be doing. And we also need to know that relocation of it won't exacerbate the situation. And I think we said before that no additional equipment can be added to this building when we're done. And though I just want to say that the power reduction switch on the door is a good idea, except that when I saw what it is, these little plastic contacts that you buy at Home Depot, and then I actually went onto YouTube to see the wiring for this, because they don't show us the wiring, right? And so the little contacts are on an old steel door. As the door starts to bend from wind or whatever it is, the contacts start to, there's less and less reliability on what the contacts are doing, and at a certain point they won't trigger anything. The wires will get disconnected. It's hardly anything. I mean, it's a very extremely low-tech solution. So that's another reason why I don't believe that we can totally depend on this in perpetuity. It's something where the monitoring will have to make sure that it's working. And that's why we need to be able to see on the roof where those 30-minute yellow caution areas are. So my recommendation is that before we bring this to a vote, and if there's other suggestions, that the roof be painted with those hot spots shown, that a monitoring program be set up now, where there's exposure levels tested in 4-month intervals, and that some kind of a tenant group is set up to receive them, and that the applicant meet with the fire department to make sure the fire department's okay with this. And, yeah. Anybody else?
I just think that they should add the signage that they're placing on the doors on the plans, and more information about the alarmed entry. I agree, I didn't know where the disconnect switch was. And I was wondering if there were any other antenna similar to the T-Mobile, the directional antenna, or if that's the only one, which had to be redirected so that it didn't, cause a problem in terms of exposure. And that should be noted on the plans where that is located.
That is already.
Oh, it is?
They circle it in
T-Mobile?
red. I think that one, oh, you're saying the Verizon one was.
I thought it was the T-Mobile directional antenna
Yeah,
that they had
there was
to-
one that they circle, that's in the corner. They circled it in red, but they don't
Okay.
tell you what it is, they just circle it and they say, I forget what they say. They just say the name of the company.
Okay.
I don't know
Well,
if
I
it's
just was
T-Mobile.
wondering if there's any other directional antenna like that.
Okay.
And then on the plans, they should also show where the caution areas are at the present time, so that we can compare it to when they come back.
Yes, on the plans.
Yes. Including, the red and the yellow.
Oh, all of them, okay, so
Yeah.
all the degrees, all degrees.
Right.
All degrees. Right. I mean, there was a second test done by an independent testing company, which all came out green. So
Well,
that made
if you
look
looked
like-
at it, there was one spot, which was 132, which they actually measured at full power, and then they remeasured at reduced power. So they were taking advantage of the reduced wattage of the FM station, and I believe that's what they based everything's okay on.
Okay.
And they only compared it to occupational levels.
Right,
Right.
right. So it's really not apples to apples?
Yes.
In terms, okay. 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 All right.
Item number 5, 23804BZ, 62 Cooper Square, Manhattan.
Okay, with this one, I think they've been responsive to our questions. They, according to the submissions, they installed the acoustical measures that had been recommended. The fire alarm and sprinkler systems have been installed, inspected, and are operational. And the building residents have been notified of this hearing, and so far, we've not received any comments, so assuming we don't receive any tomorrow, then we can, anybody else?
Item number 6, 9806BZ, 1045 Beach 9th Street, Queens.
Okay, the drawings were clarified to show the floor-to-floor heights and also to justify the need for those heights. I found that actually very helpful, finally. That was making the drawings that we saw done on the board by the architect. The mechanicals were pulled away as much as possible from the perimeter, and railings, bulkheads, mechanical equipment, and play roof fencing were shown on the elevations and sections. Gates were provided at the corner, sort of like cat-a-corner on the corners of the play area fencing, presumably to allow fire department access. I'd like the fire department to verify that that's okay, because they had mentioned in the prior hearing they want the fences pulled back 3 feet from the edge, and the railing locations are not dimensioned on the drawings, and they need to be, but fire department should just check that that's okay for them. Let's see, the steel estimates were provided showing a $400,000 savings between this one and that one. But I have to say that unless I see the steel drawings or I see what the drawings are based on, it's just 2 sets of papers with 2 sets of numbers, and it doesn't mean anything to me. So, but otherwise, I think, other than the fire department issue, I think they've responded. Anybody else?
I believe they have responded to our concerns.
Yeah, I'm satisfied.
Okay.
New cases, item number 7, 37471BZ, 20511 Northern Boulevard, Queens.
Okay, we still need community board recommendation, but we do have a letter from the Auburndale Improvement Association stating that there have been many complaints about the business. I just don't know what they are, but we have one immediate neighbor who apparently testified here at the prior renewal, who has many complaints about noise, trash, and fumes. The applicant didn't address any of those concerns in the materials and should. I looked at the testimony, or say the resolution before the board in 2004, where it requested, this is more like a note, so it had gone through some things, where the board had requested that the front car display area be limited to 15 cars, and that a fence rather than bollards be located around that area to prevent cars from being on the sidewalk, but that the applicant had persuaded the board that the business doesn't work unless there's 21 cars parked there, and that bollards really are the only way to work, otherwise you have all these people pulling out and get around the fence, so that kind of made sense. Photographs and site visits may reveal something else, but photographs show there's lots of extraneous banners and flags that need to be removed. It looks like the fence along Clearview was replaced prior to the hearing, which is good. And that the parking area was cleaned up. But in terms of complaints about noise, fumes, and visual appearance in the R district, it seems like the correct and standard approach is planting, is landscaping, and this doesn't have any. It's very barren. So it seems like if they had planting beds along the perimeter, all the way around the perimeter of that parking area with very dense shrubs that grow high, like we've seen on this type of cedar, that would help that problem. And the spaces should also be striped.
Yes.
And the drawings are just missing a note that the bollards are 3 feet high minimum. That was what was approved originally, and looks like what they installed. Anybody?
I think they should, not only should they stripe the area in which the, in the front there where the cars are, but also in their employee area.
Yeah.
Should be striped. And I agree, it really needs some landscaping. It's just so barren, and, it just looks, to me, it looks just horrible. Did we receive all of the original plans from the previous
No.
incarnation?
Only
It's like
from-
there's
a
only
couple of
3 of
sheets.
3. It's
Yeah.
like, and they're missing 2 sheets. So if we can find that so that I can compare what they're proposing now for the elevations, et cetera, that we, can see it.
Previously approved from 2004?
Yeah, they only gave us 1 sheet. They only gave us the
Yeah.
plan.
Right.
And it says 3 of 3, so there are clearly 2 more sheets that didn't make the cut.
Anything else?
I felt it's rather fresh in my mind because I just was there last week, and the site was unusually clean, I would say. There was a guy who was constantly brooming while I was there, and I did not see extraneous signs. Maybe they've been removed from the time the photos were submitted. In terms of the parking space, the total number of parking spaces that were striped in that what they call customer or employee parking space, it's 12. I think though we had permitted a higher number, so that's something we may want to revise.
They were striped?
They were yellow lines.
Oh, they were, okay.
And that's how I counted it.
In the rear parking
In the
area.
rear parking lot, that's how I
Right.
counted. There were 12 of them. I think now that we have lesser parking spaces, that also gives us the ability to landscape, provide landscaping. The fence is in good condition along that. With that said, in terms of the noise, I would say it's right along the Clearview Expressway exit, which is also serves as an exit ramp. So there is a lot of traffic that is, it is a good amount of the traffic, even during the morning rush hour, was really vehicles exiting from Clearview, getting onto Northern Boulevard. So I think we need to be careful about the noise issue and how much that is really being caused by this use versus surrounding uses.
The neighbor complained about people talking and debating in the parking lot. I mean, that think that's what it was. It was sort of business-related noise, but it wasn't very specific.
Okay.
It didn't, oh, and also talked about cars revving up and things like that, I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah, when I
That I didn't
visited,
see.
I'm sorry, did you finish? Okay. Oh, when I visited the site, in the rear parking area, there were 6 cars that had no plates, which I assumed were cars for sale. So I don't think it's totally just used for employees and customer parking.
Yeah.
And the other thing was, I noticed that there's very large HVAC units in the corner of the building, and which actually goes onto the, there's a small addition called offices and storage, a lot of ductwork, and an HVAC unit, which is very unsightly, which I think could be part of the noise problem. They should maybe put some an acoustic enclosure, or just make it look a little better, and they should give us plans for that.
I did notice a little bit of the wrought iron fence along 205th Street, a little bit buckled.
Oh,
I mean, it just bent a little bit. I
Like
wouldn't call
someone
it
ran
buckled.
into it, actually.
Yeah,
That's what it looked like.
probably, it just looks like somebody ran into it, so a little bit of fixing.
And in terms of the front parking area, when I was there, they had 20 cars in there.
was that then full to its max?
Well, it had 12 cars facing the street, and then in back of those 12 cars,
There
there's
was-
additional
there
cars.
was that.
There were like 8 cars behind.
Okay, but they're allowed to have 21 according to the approval.
Well, I think it's 21 on the site. There's also cars in the building. So I wasn't quite clear about that.
No, I think it was 21 in the front,
Oh, okay.
and I forget the number in the back.
In the building, there's a certain number?
It says, sorry,
Maximum 22 automobiles parked in the sales and display lot.
Right, so that's in,
So is that the front
That's in
portion?
front.
Okay,
yeah,
all right.
So
display should be the.
that was not very clear from the compliance chart. I think it would be,
no, you have to, the compliance charts I find always confusing. You have to read the resolution. And, they never updated their C of O, so the conditions are the 94 conditions, which allowed no use of that lot at the back. So it's hard to, yeah. Okay. Yeah, okay. Anybody else? No? Okay. Okay.
Item number 8, 7799 BZ, 255-39 Jericho Turnpike, Queens.
Okay, we need a community board recommendation. I was trying to describe this lot to myself, irregularly shaped. I decided it's a dog-shaped lot. So it's a very strange lot with lots of bits of frontages, but no real, continuous frontage. I just make note that the prior board resolutions alternately required that the gate on 256th Street be kept permanently closed. And then other times it said, remove the curb cut, and then other times it said, just make sure it's closed after business hours. I'm just trying to understand, what's going on about that place? Is that a disturbance to neighbors? Why did that come up each time? And I'd like the applicant to address that. Also, I'm having looked at how the cars come in and leave all from Jericho. I don't actually understand how that lot is accessed from 256th Street, except by going from 256th, and why you'd use it, because it's not part of the normal flow. It's not like a car that needs to have detailing work or something like that would then drive into that lot. All the drive-ins are facing the wrong way, right? So,
Well, I have questions of whether it was used for maybe just employee parking, or I too sort of questioned how the circulation would work, and why, it was even there and used. I think maybe they could think of a different solution for that gate, because although they seem to paint it when it gets graffiti on it, it just, it's adjacent, directly adjacent to a residential home. So it would be nice, perhaps, if it was a nicer looking
So replace the gate.
gate and fencing. I also had some issues with exactly how the circulation on, on the lot worked, with cars coming in, and then they talked about how they would split between those who wanted interior work done and those who wanted just the exterior, and it was unclear to me exactly where that happened and then how they actually get off the
So you
site.
didn't get your car washed?
I did not. I did not get the car wash. That duty falls on my husband. He has promised to wash the car, so I make him do that.
You could have written it off as a business.
I will, next time. So, but I wondered how that, how that works.
Anybody else?
I had concerns about the sign. This is an illuminated sign.
Oh.
And while I was there, it did show, it did operate as an accessory sign, so I walked away and then I looked around and then there was an ad for an elevator company, then there was an ad for another, so.
Funny.
So,
And meanwhile,
my
we have
question is.
permits on the sign.
Well, we do have a permit for the sign, I mean, the sign,
was-
but it is as an accessory sign, and an illuminated advertisement sign, I don't believe it's permitted
No,
here, so
no.
I would like some clarification on it. Okay.
Because I was so delighted to see permits for the sign. I thought, that makes it so easy.
I noticed the same thing regarding the sign. I saw ads for Fat Ernie's Restaurant. And also regarding
And
the,
none of these signs were on that immediate property, I wasn't
No.
sure what the zoning lot was. to
oh,
do.
yeah,
there was like
that's my point, yes.
blocks away, Fat Ernie's,
Yeah.
they gave the address and everything, and they showed these big heroes. And so, regarding the lot adjacent to the residential area, they had a sign, a banner on the fence for detailing services. So it seemed to me that you go around the corner and you go in there for detailing.
Oh, I didn't see that, but if they're doing that, then they should not be.
Should
No,
show
they
us.
should
But
not.
that's not what they're even showing on the circulation. It says all of it happens inside the building. You take a left, you take a right.
If you miss that exit, you have to go all the way, and that's a dead end, right? You have to go all the way on the other side of the block and come around.
And come all the way around.
Come all the way around, so it's.
Yeah. And the other thing I noticed on two of the submissions is the tax map and the survey both make reference to a small portion of Lot 8 that's to be included in this lot. And I'm not sure whether then it's a proposal to expand the zoning lot, or it was always part of the zoning lot.
That was not
Yeah.
clear.
It looks like, it's like a very, very strange sort of razor blade portion of the lot that probably should have belonged to this lot in the first place before they made a dog. It's like the tail of the dog is missing. Anyway, okay. All right.
Okay, appeals calendar, decision items, item number 9, 3515A, 2001 Bartow Avenue, the Bronx.
Okay. Such a difficult case. So many hours and hours of trying to figure this out. And so this is where I came out, and I'm interested to hear how everybody came out. So the first thing about this is that the proposed sign, or depends on how you look at it, is 9,000 square feet, which, to put in perspective, is multiple times the size, at least 10 times the size of an average person's apartment. The premise on which that 9,000 square feet is based, because you're in a C7 without any limitation on the size of signs, right, is that, or the number of signs, is that you could, instead of having 9,000 square feet, you could have just as easily 30,000 square feet, or 200,000 square feet, or whatever. And even in this case, though it's all mounted to one pole, you could easily have multiple poles where the images are close together, and you'd make the exact same argument. So there's actually no limit to the number of signs. And And so that, if that were the result, is clearly an absurd result and not what was intended by the drafters of the zoning resolution under any circumstances. The other part of it is that this sign that's within 327 feet or so of the arterial, if allowed to be 9,000 square feet or 20,000 square feet or whatever, would clearly be a hazard to drivers, which is the whole point of the regulation that prevents large signs from being within 200 feet of an arterial, and then they're only allowed to be 201 square feet and so on. It's to protect drivers from the nuisance, and we see that not just the nuisance, the danger, the distraction, which we learned about with the Fresh Direct sign, is a distraction from huge distances. In addition to which, this sign is in close proximity to, extremely visible by, and just by coincidence of its location, to an enormous number of residences. So it's right next to an enormous housing development. So it seems to me that from a public policy perspective, we have a duty to protect the public from what will be safety concerns and nuisance, because if this thing were erected, it would present both of those things. So, but then, to go to what does it say in the text, and what has DOB's behavior been? I noted that the zoning resolution definition of a sign actually gives no guidance at all whether disparate elements on a structure, and we know a sign has to be either on a structure or be a structure, whether disparate elements on a structure constitute a single or multiple signs. It doesn't tell you anything. And the definition of surface area, which is the definition of surface area, doesn't tell you is not the definition of a sign. It gives instructions on how to measure a sign, not on whether or not something is a sign. You have to go back to the sign definition for that. So, and as a result, we see, and I understand why they're so inconsistent, DOB's application of the zoning definition has been inconsistent because the guidance is really not there. So, in terms of absurd results, we see in DOB's application of the zoning definition, the case of the aqueduct sign for that, was it the Belmont Roosevelt Aqueduct Yonkers? We see that the DOB concluded that because of the space between the different pieces of text, the number 7 was a separate sign. When DOB did that, they absolutely lost the definition of sign. Can't be 7, can't be a sign. It doesn't announce, it doesn't direct attention to or advertise anything except this number 7 when it's standing alone. 7 what? So that goes back a little bit to another case we had, right? And so it seems to me that DOB has been inconsistent in its application, and also its application has been leading to absurd results like this aqueduct sign. So I also note that this particular sign is really a novel case, unlike the other ones that were presented to us, because one of the very uniquely permissive zoning in the C7 district that doesn't exist anywhere else, that's also located near an arterial that doesn't exist anywhere else. I mean, the C7 exists in one other place, but not near an arterial. Also, it's unique because of this relatively new technology that's being applied in sort of this billboard fashion. And also, because the proposed structures are very similar to the old-fashioned historical rooftop and historical billboard signs around which the 61 and the 45 zoning was based. You know, signs, arterial highways have been regulated since about 1945. And those signs were structural frames onto which disparate elements were mounted, like we see the History Channel and lots of other things, or billboards were mounted. And so that's the one place where the zoning resolution actually did give some guidance, oddly. And so because this structure is so similar to that structure, I look at the definition of surface area, where it does give some information about what to do when you have a two-sided sign mounted to a single freestanding structural frame. And that's where they tell you that where it's a two-sided sign mounted to a single freestanding structural frame, you only measure one side, and they describe it as two signs, back to back. And so that's what tells me, and I understand the appellant's argument that they could change the structural system and then change the argument, but what we have before us, I see as a single freestanding structural frame where the sign, each sign is mounted back to back, and therefore you have two signs, not 27 signs. And I'm not saying that there aren't other ways to do it, and Commissioner Shanda came up with one with lots of poles, for example. But in this case, I see that as a single sign, and therefore 9,000 square feet, and therefore way in excess of what's permitted within 327 feet of an arterial. Next. Anyone who wants to speak next?
Well, although I understand and could possibly agree with DOB's one structure, one sign theory and the analysis on the surface area, however, the analysis doesn't really, for me, take into account the type of visual display with those multiple panels, and that they're so self-contained. I was persuaded by the appellant's argument that the 1210 meaning of surface area doesn't necessarily include the voids one has in this pattern. DOB takes the position that one monopole and one structure, with one structure holding several elements, with this, including all of the voids around those elements, would be one sign. To me, that there's a flaw in the analysis, which you described, that where you have each element, where there's, if it were to be supported by an individual structure of some kind, one easily draws a different conclusion in terms of the zoning surface area and what that sign constitute. But you'd get the same visual effect. So to me, if you have that kind of disparate sort of outcome by just simply changing the way that you would construct something, to me, there's a flaw in the analysis, and therefore the analysis can't necessarily stand up. Also, the analysis does not directly take into account those voids. And 880 Garrison Avenue, with a single monopole and having 2 feet in between these elements, these square elements, was considered multiple signs. And to me, it becomes a very subjective view when you're analyzing it. So one plan examiner takes a look at this and says 2 feet between each element, if they're separate signs, makes the cut. If you have then only 1 foot between each element, the plan examiner is now perceiving that as an entire whole. And I don't think that that makes much sense. I think that, you know, the words, the text needs to be tightened, perhaps, or to change with the technology. But I just see that you have 2 different outcomes with the same type of analysis. And you can't really have a rule that would do that.
I feel that the defining issue here is the determination of the surface area of a sign as per the zoning resolution. And the surface area of a sign shall be the entire area within a continuous perimeter enclosing the extreme limits of writing, representation, emblem, or any figure of similar character, together with any material or color forming an integral part of the display, ... I feel that that's fairly clear and detailed language. And I also feel that Department of Buildings has, in the past, followed that as in determining what actually constituted a sign. And so therefore, I really agree with the appellant that the plain meaning of the 1210 definition of a sign and the determination of the surface area as constituting a continuous perimeter around the extreme limits of text for the purpose of determining the surface area of the sign makes this 27 independent signs. And I think that through the examples that the appellant has presented, they have shown that the past and the current DOB practice, both in the field and in the appeals process, supported this standard. And I think that any other interpretation that DOB has proffered here in the past few months was rather strained and required us to look beyond that plain meaning of the text and insert other wording that's not currently in the text as written. And so I also feel that none of the other interpretations that DOB has presented to us are standardized and also uniformly followed by its employees. So I feel that DOB needs to vocalize a standard policy that's uniform, that can be followed by everybody, that not only is easily understood and followed by its employees, but also by the people in the industry who are trying to figure out what they actually can install in the various places in the city. And I didn't see any example of that here. I just saw Department of Buildings listening to our questions and our critiques at the various hearings, and then going back and trying to figure out, well, how could we distinguish this sign here on Bartow from what we've done in the past, or how can we make it so that, you know, we can ensure that this doesn't happen again? And yes, the text as written, applied in today's day, has led to what some people might think is an absurd result, but I don't think that the ends justify the means here. I don't think that Department of Buildings should jump to a position of, we can't let this happen, so we have to back into some sort of a policy. I think that, unfortunately, the text as written supports an installation like this, and if this is not in the public good, then I think city planning has to go back and rewrite the text. I don't think the text should be a static document. I think the text has to evolve as the industry evolves. And so that's where I think the problem is. But I'm agreeing with the appellant. I think they have some very convincing arguments.
Well, I read the same zoning resolution in terms of surface area that Commissioner Otley Brown read, and I come to the other conclusion, which means if I go to the extreme limits of representation, you're including all the panels because they can deliver one message, and that's what I'm saying is the surface area of the sign. And those little perimeters are really, even when they gave the examples in their most recent submittal, they're negligible compared to the size of the sign. And a lot of the examples they gave, although I cannot explain away, you know, why DOB approves certain things or why they use a certain way of analyzing signs. But for example, the large shopping mall signs, where each tenant has to put in an application. The zoning resolution says that they have to prove that they're a use on the zoning lot. So if a store changes, of course, you have to put in another little application, and then their total signage is regulated. So I didn't really see how that was relevant to this argument. And there were other examples, like for example, the Corona sign. That's considered separate signs. Maybe it shouldn't be because it's delivering one message, but because the copy of that can change, maybe it's not something that's always regulated by DOB in terms of whether it's going to be two messages or one message. But just because one sign might be at fault throughout the city, or a few signs, I don't really see that as a reason to approve this as being however many signs it hopes to be, 27 signs. So I just think I would not approve this application.
I go back to what I have said before, which is, I think this regulation from the 1950s had been very clear about signs within arterial highway, and I think that intent has been clear and has been utilized to a large extent, while in this particular case, the zoning may have overlooked because it didn't see a C7 next to an arterial, but there aren't that many, so maybe, and zoning cannot write for every specific site, but the intent of a highway, of a sign of certain size, beyond certain size being close to an arterial highway, has been a very important issue, and it's a safety issue. And that goes back to, again, the surface area and how do we interpret surface area. Again, with the changing technology, how we're going to interpret surface area is going to change, and I hope DOB will look into that and factor that in, and specifically in this case, I see this as one large sign, two on each side of a monopole. That's how I read it, and I think with the changing technology, that's how it would be read and it can be used, and I therefore will, I think DOB has made, I'm not convinced that appellant has made an argument for me to agree with their point of view.
Thank you. Okay, thank you.
Item number 10, 106, 107, 15A, 4229, and 4231 149th Street, Queens. We are still waiting for a final letter from DOT. Community Board is meeting on May 9th, and will let us know the results. And Commissioner Brown asked for a revision to the borough BPP plan and the BPP plan and the site plan. There's some little numbers off.
Okay.
The curb cut and the driveway,
Yeah.
or the parking pads
Pad-
leading up
sorry.
to the garages, sorry.
So defer this.
Yeah.
Item number 11, 218, 15A, 428 St. Mark's Place, Staten Island.
We have DOT sign off, so we have lift off. Anybody else? No.
Zoning calendar decision items. Item number 12, 30-12BZ, 14241 Roosevelt Avenue, Queens.
Okay.
Received a
Yeah.
set of plans.
So I just wanted to get into this a little bit more detail. Unfortunately, I don't think they're quite ready. According to, so they did provide a planting plan, but I'm learning a lot about the cypress tree. Because everyone is specking cypress, but nobody's actually looking up to see what happens to a cypress tree. So the particular one that they spec'd grows to be 60 feet high. And you need quite a tree ball to support 60 feet. And this is on the roof of a building. So I don't know where you get the soil for the tree ball. So let's just say they spec'd the wrong tree. And in addition to which, they need to space it so it creates a dense buffer, and they spaced it really far apart. And the interesting thing about this spec is it grows to be 60 feet high and 3 feet wide. Yes, because they gave us a little chart.
And then the growth.
Yeah, but you can't just look at the little chart. You have to go online and read what the landscaping guys say and all that sort of stuff. And they're the ones that are like, it's an excellent choice for like that counterpoint in the garden where you want to make a statement. So the other application we talked about, that one uses a different cypress, which would have been the right one, that grows lower and wide, like 8 feet wide, and then you can plant them like 5 feet apart, and then so 8 feet wide they'll meet. So anyway, they need to spec a different tree. They need to make them closer together. They need to make sure that the planter that they're putting on the roof actually can handle a tree ball, because it's not like a little ground cover. They do have a little ground cover also, which I'm sure will do fine, the planter, but trees need depth. So the whole idea isn't that they're going to plant 50 dead trees, right?
They might be better off with shrubs of some sort. And
Yeah.
then I was concerned a little bit about the density, because they have this plexiglass or something wall behind it on these hangers, which I feel will need maintenance. So I was wondering, how are they going to maintain the wall with these dense plantings? So I figured they do need some space in between
Yeah.
the shrubs to get to the wall and look at the condition and make sure it's in, you know,
But
still.
that's space this way as opposed to space between the wall, and they need to get a guy in between the tree to get to the back, and then a guy behind the tree to get to it. That's a thing, you can draw anything, you know? Someone actually has to think about this. I agree with that. And then the other thing was, they are using masonry units for the extension of the parapet height, right? And they're talking about just painting them. So in the end, you'll have this terrible-looking sidewalls. So they need to stucco the sidewalls of the existing building and bring the stucco all the way up to cover the CMU units and then paint those so everything's uniform. So, because this is an eyesore for the neighbors, that's part of, and the neighbors' windows look right out onto this. And then also, in going back to see, because I know this is a remand, so this was here at the board a long time ago, I went back and I looked at old photographs, and there was all this mechanical equipment on the roof. What's happening to all the mechanical equipment? It was tons of ductwork. Is it all being moved to the interior of the building? I don't know, just if they could respond to that.
So I guess we're reopening tomorrow.
Maybe.
Isn't,
Well, if they could, because I don't know if they can do the landscaping work fast. I mean, you could do this relatively quickly if you knew how. If you asked somebody who knows stuff.
Revised plan?
I used to do landscaping in the architecture, one of the architecture offices I worked, and it would take weeks to find the right tree. Anyway. Okay,
Yikes, okay.
this one is yours, Cooper Street.
Item number 13, 297, 13 BZ, 308 Cooper Street, Brooklyn.
Oh, I didn't even realize.
I can just, I know that it's an E-designated site, and I think,
What were we waiting for?
and we were waiting for them to submit some materials, which I think they've accepted the E-designation, and
So
therefore,
we
we
can
I
don't,
was wondering if we needed a response from DEP or DOH.
I don't think so, because it's an E-designated site, so
Yeah,
since, in
we
order,
put a DE designation on this site in lieu of sort of DEP work, and that's standard practice for E-designations, that's what they're
So
for.
there shouldn't be any real issue then after the
No.
application, right?
No. And I believe the last time this was heard, there were
We had to wait. for-
different, yeah.
Yeah, okay. So, all right,
so it was a different situation.
Yeah, there's a different situation.
Right,
so we can move forward.
Yes.
Okay.
yeah, this was taken off calendar in
Right.
September of 2014. Okay. Okay.
Item number 14, 329, 14 BZ, 13, 16 Avenue West, Brooklyn.
So I know there was a submission, I believe a submission was made on this. Did anyone see it?
No.
I didn't.
Okay, so a submission, so assuming a submission was made, then we can vote on this, but they were supposed to have corrected the rear yard dimension and added a note to the drawing saying that the open area landscaping, height, curb cut, and slope should be determined by DOB?
Yes, they did.
They did that, okay.
Drawings revised to add a note for DOB to approve planting and location of the parking spot. Plans show second parking space in line with the garage, side elevations, longitudinal sections, planting calculation.
Good, okay, and 24-foot rear yard? Don't know.
I don't.
Okay,
that I
we'll
didn't
check
catch
that.
in the submission.
Okay.
Item 15, 57, 15 BZ, 482 Logan Street, Brooklyn.
Okay, I think we're good with this one, right?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay. Finally.
16, 188, 15 BZ, 100 West 72nd Street.
Okay, that was, this one I did see that there was a submission where they were just supposed to, what were they supposed to do? They were supposed to correct the, they were supposed to correct the floor area to make sure that it included the first floor,
Right, they have included
and that's all.
And they've submitted the sprinkler and the fire alarm.
Yeah, right. Okay.
Continued hearing items, item number 17, 240, 14 BZ, 1620 Shore Boulevard, Brooklyn.
Okay, this is the one that's got the crazy, I don't know, this one's okay, right? No, this is the one where we're still not sure whether they mean to be measuring from design flood and whether the the FRCE is higher here for some reason than design flood.
Right, if the architect is going to be here, they should explain why the flood-resistant construction elevation is not the same as the design flood elevation for a one-family home.
Right.
So it's my understanding that they're the same.
Right. Uh, Okay, that's this one, right?
Yeah, that came in this morning.
Yeah. this
Yeah.
just came in
Yeah,
this
and then
morning.
they supposedly did submit an urban cartographic study,
They did.
Which
but
I didn't see.
I didn't get a chance to look at either.
I didn't see a new one.
This morning.
There was, oh, this morning.
This came in.
It was very recent, yeah.
Okay.
There was a push.
So, yeah, I haven't had a chance to look at it.
Okay. Oh, and we also need to get the DOB objection on the rear yard, which apparently they have a meeting at DOB today. So hopefully they'll get it. Next.
Item number 18, 33314 BZ, 2323 East Fifth Street, Brooklyn.
They wanted to adjourn this.
Item number 19, 2115 BZ, 11235 69th Avenue, Queens.
Okay. This one's always, despite the scale of the enlargement, I guess, the drawings follow the letter of the law because of all the different kinds of waivers that you can get. The huge attic, which has a maximum ceiling height of 7'11", therefore falls under the floor area maximum, even though it's a huge attic and changes the bulk of the building. And then the cellar, which has a 3+ fixture bathroom spa, basically, also follows the TPPN. So, and the only thing that I noted was that I'm not sure that the application of the 500 square foot bonus for the two-car parking garage actually is supposed to be applied that way. If you look at the zoning resolution definition, 1210, it seems to allow a deduction of up to 500 square feet for a two-car garage. But that's supposed to be because normally a garage in this zoning district counts as floor area. But because they allow for this deduction, it would be the area of the garage that's deducted, not 500 square feet and everybody gets it. And this is only a 380 square foot garage. So I think they've over-deducted.
I would tend to agree. I think it's the square footage of the actual garage, not just a blanket deduction.
Because it's to encourage you to install a garage and not take a hit on it.
Right.
But
Also, I had problems with the maneuvering capability of two cars to actually get into.
If one car is in the garage, how do you get the other one in?
But no, how do you get out of your car?
how do you get out of your
I
car?
might be able to get in and be really successful, but I will never be able to tell you because I can't get out of the car. So
It has a little track and you...
it was a mystery to me. So I think they have to reevaluate that.
Yeah.
And I still had a question regarding their side and rear yard setbacks. It's my understanding that above 30 feet, any portion of a building has to set back. And they're still, I just want them to explain why they, both on the sides and in the rear, they're exceeding that. And also, in the streetscape, they're not showing the two side dormers. So, and I didn't really think, what was it, the streetscape does not comply with the roof plan and the sections, and they have dormers which do not appear.
Okay. Okay. All right. It would be helpful to bring the architect to this, so we could talk about those kinds of things. Where are the dormers?
You want the architect tomorrow?
Yeah, that would be helpful, then cuts to the, you don't see the dormers in the elevations either.
Right, it's not consistent.
Okay.
Item number 20, 12615 BC, 1782 East 27th Street, Brooklyn.
So, this is the ongoing saga of the side yard, minimum total side yard requirement. The proposal is to decrease the combined side yard width to less than the required 11 foot 4 inches. The existing 2 foot 11 and a half inch side yard requires that the other be 8 foot 4 and a half, not 7 foot 2 and a half, so off by a foot and change. They also, they haven't established that the rear yard extension was legal. They can't establish that the rear yard extension was illegal, so you can't rely on that side yard width
Exactly.
in the future.
Right,
right?
we can extend a non-complying side yard, but not an illegal side yard.
Correct. So and they can reduce the size of their non-compliant, or that's actually, that 8 foot, that other side yard is wide. So they can reduce that, but to not less than 8 foot 4 and a half. And also the statement of fact states that the existing 11 foot 7 and a half inch side yard on the other side, that's the existing side yard, is a legal non-compliance. I didn't understand why that's described that way. Because when you add them together, they're meeting the minimum. You don't have to add them, in fact, it meets the minimum total. And also, so there's this really long ramp coming from the rear yard. And I understand the idea of having handicapped access to a house that's raised, but I don't actually understand how you get there. There's no garage at the back, so it's not like you're going to drive your car into the back and then the person unloads and goes up the ramp. There's no entry from the front. So how's it supposed to work? We also discussed at the last hearing that there's no justification for the second floor extension at the rear, in that it's not in concert with the neighborhood character, since no other houses for most of the block, especially, and certainly for the ones immediately surrounding, has shallow rear yards. Like none of them have below minimum garage rear yards. So I don't know why no change was made there. I do see that they pulled the attic floor back. No photos of the rear yard were provided either to help support the argument, plus the statement of facts makes no mention of this subject. We also stated at the last hearing that the house is too high compared to its neighbors, in particular due to the very high attic. No new materials were provided to justify the height. The massing of that attic could be, it's a wacky.
I can't understand how they're going to build it.
Oh.
It's just a very strange attic. It's got things popping out. I've never seen anything like it.
Great. And in elevation, it's just very interesting. We also discussed previously that you can't use city property to meet the front yard landscaping requirements. And so they have to recalculate that and show how they did their measurements on the plan. Also, the 30% of the area is supposed to be measured from the street wall to the property line, not from the front of the porch to the property line, especially since the front porch was never permitted. And then also the axos, which are, I admit, difficult to understand, seem to indicate that the proposal penetrates the wire diagram. But, they could clarify that by swinging the axo around a little bit so that you're not seeing lines falling outside on the paper. I'm not sure. Okay, anybody else on that?
My issues.
One of the submission included 1980s tax map, but it's of the adjacent property, not of the subject property, so I wasn't clear what this was, I guess, to indicate that the patio was, the porch was there, but I just was not sure what the purpose of that drawing, photo was.
And then when they give their area study conclusions, they talk about 95 homes like this, but they never tell us what's the total to like form a conclusion, you know, like in terms of what percentage
What does the
We don't know
is what
how many.
FAR. Yeah, we don't know how many homes are in the total, which,
Anybody else? Okay.
Item number 21, 25315 BC, 9997 East 22nd Street, Brooklyn.
Easy for you to say.
They requested an adjournment on this, in part dependent on having already made a submission. So I don't know if that was made, so I don't know if we can adjourn to whenever. Yeah. I'm not sure we have time anyway on the calendar, but let's just, yeah, I don't know if anything was made. Okay. That's it.
That's it. This concludes the public review session for May 2nd, 2016.
Thank you all.
Check